Jiddu Krishnamurti said it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. Anthropologists talk about a thing called evolutionary mismatch. That is, our society, our technology, our culture is accelerating and progressing faster than we as animals, and that's essentially what we are, faster than we can keep up. For the last 200 years, perhaps, maybe 1,000, the rate of acceleration in our civilization has been far, far faster than the rate of evolution within ourselves. And this means that our nature, the true sense of who we are, is out of alignment with the world that we live in. And this is leading us to problems. The wheels of the capitalist society, they are lubricated, greased by our desire, our sense of lack. So when you see those billboards for those advertising those holidays, and those people with the perfect smiles and the perfect bodies and the perfect families are all having a wonderful time, we're led to think, where did I go wrong? What's wrong with me? But the whole thing is that there's nothing wrong with us. But our expectations of how we're supposed to live, how we're supposed to be, who we're supposed to be, are out of line with who we actually are. And for some people, this can cause problems. You get anxiety, you get depression, you get midlife crises when you realise you've spent half of your life already and you're deeply dissatisfied, you're discontent, you're confused about what your goals are and who you're supposed to be. And so there can be a sense of striving to get something, get back to something. But all along, this thing is in us. It's who we've always been. We've carried it around with us all the time. And sometimes to find that again, we have to strip away all that we are not, all the kind of baggage that we've accumulated over a lifetime. Muji says, step into the fire of self-discovery. It will not burn you. It will burn everything you are not. And sometimes the way to do that is we have to face up to our suffering. All this discontent, all this bitterness and anger, which is a result of this kind of misalignment of who we really are and where we really are. We need to face it, understand it, learn to kind of nourish it and make friends with it, and take ownership of it so that we can say, no more of this. I need to find out who I am. I'm not here for validation, for permission, for the right to take up this space. I am here to be the person I was meant to be. So I wanted to speak to someone about this, and I got in touch with Donna Lancaster. Donna is the co-founder of the Bridge Retreat, and they work with people to overcome childhood trauma, abusive relationships, all the scars that we can gather throughout life, to get back to that sense of who we really are, to get that liberation and return to who we came into this world to be. She works with people connecting with them physically, about reading their own bodies and the way they're feeling. And I spoke to her. She very kindly and graciously gave up her time to talk to me about her own perspectives on how we can get back to being that person that we truly are, how we can seek that out and find the person that we've been carrying around with us, that we've been living with, although not listening to, for probably most of our whole lives. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. I will come back at the end with some useful links and URLs and that sort of thing. And in the meantime, here I am talking with Donna Lancaster from the Bridge Retreat. All right, so Donna, thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast. You are the founder of a retreat called The Bridge, which is based in a lovely location just down in, is it East Sussex?
We've got two. We've got one in, two venues that we use. One in East Sussex and the other is in Berkshire.
Ah, very nice. Yeah, so in leafy surrounds. And I mean, how did that happen? Tell me about what the Bridge does and what the benefits are to people and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so it is a 6-day program, and essentially, Chris, it is about supporting people to live more authentically, to kind of get out of their own way, to clear any emotional blocks or anything in their life that's holding them back. So it's kind of a program, a sort of series of experiences that are put together to support that process. And it's different. People come for all different reasons. And it really is, in essence, when you pare it down, that's what we're doing, is we're supporting people to literally get out of their heads and into their body and allow their body and the body's wisdom to take over. Because as you know, so many of us are living what I call from the neck up, and that's what gets us into so much trouble.
That's really interesting, because it seems to be a recurring theme on a lot of my podcasts that the people who seem to be happiest and the most successful as well are people who are kind of aligned with their values. So the actions that they take are aligned with their values. But someone like me will struggle because we're afraid to ask for what we want, basically. And we were always seeking sort of permission and validation and all these kind of things. But is this kind of listening to your body that I find really fascinating? Because I've heard a few people mention it. You know, how does it feel in your body when you have these thoughts, or how does it feel in your body when you have these kind of ideas, or you come up with these kind of anxieties and stuff? How did you come to that whole kind of physical relationship being a thing? Where did that come from?
I mean, it came from, like most of the things in terms of what pulls us in life. It came from my own very personal experience of really struggling with what was labelled as depression. And I was like many people, I was what I would call a functioning depressive most of the time. You know, I had a job, I had a family, I got up every day and did my thing. But I felt like I had this kind of what I describe as a terminal sadness inside me. And so I had been in therapy for years, and therapy was amazing. I would say it really helped me to join the dots. It helped me to understand why I had this terminal sadness inside me. But that wasn't enough in and of itself. That's simply awareness. And I had, of course, a few tears along the way. But it was only when I was able to literally get out of the therapist's chair and do a piece of work that involved the body that things started to really change in my life. And that got me really curious about, maybe I wasn't depressed, maybe I had unprocessed emotion sitting in my system. And then that's where I really started to focus in terms of my work and my training. And it seemed, and as I started to talk about it, Chris, people started to say, yeah, me too. I'm on antidepressants, but it doesn't feel right. And it doesn't feel that that's true. It just feels like something else. And that something else has been really has become my life's work, is supporting people to get to that place where they go in through the body, beyond the mind. We need the mind, yeah. But the mind is, it's a very robust, tried and tested computer, if you like, and we need that. We need to be able to join the dots. We need the cognition, but that emotions live in the body, and this is where we need to go. We need to go into the body to support that, and then it all can get into alignment, which is what you're touching on. Is that, and that's when people start to really feel some sense of balance and some sense of peace, if they actually dare to go into the body and let the body's wisdom do what it's trying to do, that we take pills to suppress.
I mean, I've heard people talk, it's something I've never really explored myself, this whole kind of the physical aspect of it. And I've heard people talking about the mind-body bridge and the pain body and things like this. And I know from previous experiences in the past that when I've been stressed, for example, it's manifested in a physical way. I've had stomach problems. I know other people have had kind of neck problems and things like this. But when you talk about going into the body, what does that look like? Is it exercise? Is it sort of yoga? How do you do that? How do you connect with that?
Yeah, I mean, we do it in different ways, but on the bridge, what we're really working with is supporting people to start to be able to, first of all, join the dots. So the cognition piece, my father was like this, my mother was like this, my school experience was like that, and therefore here I am making these choices. And then we start to then drop them in the body using things like therapeutic shaking. You may know about the work of Dr. Peter Levine. Dr. Peter Levine wrote Waking the Tiger, and he created a particular therapy called Somatic Experiencing, which is really, this understanding that we are essentially animals, and in terms of our stress responses, it's absolutely the same. We need to be able to, we can learn so much from animals in the wild in terms of how we can release stress and how we can access our emotional blockages. And that's what, one of the things that we use is a therapeutic shaking. So we literally get people up every day, several times a day, to shake their bodies, you know, and it's not dancing and it's not exercise. And of course we use music, but what it does is it's literally shaking the system so that the emotions can start to flow. Because as you know, I'm sure that, you know, emotion is energy. It stands for energy and motion. They're meant to flow, and every emotion has a beginning, middle and end. And where we get in trouble is we don't allow them to flow, beginning, middle and end, and they get stuck, they get interrupted in the body. And you know, I've been working in this field, Chris, for 31 years now, and you see themes in those 31 years, you know, and I've seen so much physical illness related to unprocessed grief, unprocessed pain, you know, and we get the same kinds of physical conditions that are manifesting again and again, you know, your lower back pain, your digestive issues, your throat issues, your migraines, neck, etc. Yeah, and I mean, it's not just the experiential kind of evidence, you know, the research is in, you know, it's not out, it's in terms of how the body, you know, what's that saying, you know, what the mind represses, the body expresses, and it's there for all to see. But I've just experienced it firsthand, having worked with so many people over the years, of what it costs people. And literally, suppressed emotion makes us sick. That's the bottom line. And so we have to go beyond the mind, you know. And there's a wonderful quote, and I love a quote, but I'll probably not do it justice, but it's something by Caroline Myss, so it's a big a teacher that I follow and has taught me a lot. And Caroline Myss says, you can't heal through the mind, because the mind is the sickest aspect of the psyche.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it? Everything seems to be divided. So on the one hand, you have medicine, which is all about the body, and then you have kind of spiritual, you know, the spiritual healers who are all about the spirit and our kind of emotional connection to the universal God or whatever it is. And then you have psychiatry, psychology. But actually, these are all, you know, mind, body, spirit is a singular thing in a way. And so if you're just addressing one and not addressing the others, then you're missing a whole part of the picture.
Absolutely.
This is why sleep is so important for your emotional well-being, exercise. You know, you can be the most balanced person in the world, but if you're physically neglecting yourself, that's going to be harming yourself, your confidence, your self-esteem, all of this kind of thing. Do you think this is a modern thing? Because I know a lot of these themes are thousands of years old. And one of the things I mentioned in my email yesterday was this whole idea of evolutionary mismatch. So, you know, we're living in a society now that is placing demands on us as kind of animals that we haven't had time to evolve into yet. So we're still in that kind of hunter-gatherer stage of our evolution, but we're having to deal with frameworks and structures of society which aren't natural to us. Do you think that is causing us a lot of problems at the moment?
Yeah, I think it is real, you know, soul sickness, and people, you know, if they dare to get still enough for long enough, I mean, I think people know it every day. They get this, you know, there's this yearning, there's this kind of inner knowing that something's not right, but we're kept by the consumerist and materialist and capitalist machine. We're kept so busy and so exhausted that most people haven't got the time or the energy to actually stop long enough, or the finances actually to stop long enough to kind of reflect and go inside and see that this is utter madness. And, you know, it's like Eckhart Tolle calls it collective madness. And just because it's collective doesn't make it any less mad. It is madness. And I think what you're talking about, you know, one of the questions you put in your email around what healing actually means. And it's, in essence, it means a return to wholeness. You know, it's a return. So it is that integration of all parts of our being, including the spiritual dimension to life. And so I don't think it is anything new. I think it's actually, it's like when people talk in the new year about new year, new you, and it really gets my hackles up, because it's really new year, old you, because we actually need to go back to simplicity, to minimalism, to pairing, getting rid of all the rubbish, all the stuff, and just get back to what's important, and redefining what it means to live a successful life, redefining what achievement is, and I see it as a great achievement that I'm helping to raise 3 grandsons. That's success, So yes, I mean, don't get me started. I'll tell you need a whole other podcast for that. Get on my soapbox.
But I suppose that there is an element of gratitude in that, being happy with who we are and what we've got, rather than trying to add more and more and more, in a way, just actually get rid of this. I don't need this, because I'm grateful for where I am and what I've got. But we still have to function in this kind of materialist society. We still need to pay the bills. We still kind of need to provide for our loved ones. How do you get that balance right between, returning to this more intrinsic sense of who we are, and also meeting the demands of the modern world? How do we get that right?
Well, I mean, I haven't got the answer to that, but I have some thoughts about it, which is that I don't think everybody is in a position, especially like yourself, when you've got young family, etc. We're not all in a luxurious position to be able to just follow our dreams or what makes our hearts and our soul sing, in terms of financial responsibilities. But what I would say is that you might not be able to make money doing what you love, but you can make money to do what you love, meaning that you can create pockets of time as much as possible, where you actually do something that that really is makes your heart sing, really brings you alive. And for most people that is creative expression in some form.
So do you think that, I mean, they call it the humanities, don't they? What you've got, sort of art and dance, literature, theatre, all this kind of stuff. Do you think that is, everyone needs that kind of creative outlet, or can it be something less kind of poetic? Can it be, being an entrepreneur or starting a business or something like that?
Which is a creative outlet. I mean, it's that redefining our understanding of these things, isn't it? Because I used to say to people, I'm not creative, and when anyone says that to me, I just say, I don't believe you, because if you think back to, it's a bit like, as we were saying, we're still the animals, really.
Yeah.
And it's the same if you think back to being small children, and we everything in our world was through creative expression. That's how we learned. That's how we made our way in the world, through play and creative expression, and we still have that. It's just, for many people, life got busy, we took on a lot of responsibilities, and we put that creative expression in a box. But I think it becomes, and that's again what causes so much sickness in people, and yearning and longing and searching and seeking, and they just need to part of what it is they need to go back to that box, the box that carries their pain. And also, like Pandora's box, hidden inside beneath the pain is also their creative expression, which is also hope. So yes, and I think it does come, Chris, in many forms, creative expression, and that's one of the things on the bridge, is that really we do things where, the kind of the left brainy, neck uppy people, they're sort of rolling their eyes, they're kind of singing around fires, and and even when I talk about it, it doesn't do it justice, because it makes me cringe. I think, oh, kumbaya, and it's all those kind of judgments and that we have. And it's so far from, when we free ourselves enough to let go of feeling self-conscious, the same with movement and dance and shaking, when we give ourselves permission to get out of our own way, which is part of the healing process, and and as you heal, you need less external validation anyway. And then it's just pure pleasure, and I sing, and I haven't got a great singing voice. I couldn't give 2 hoots. I sing 2 people, I sing 4 people, I sing around my house, I just, because I love singing, and it lights me up. So I think creative expression is essential, especially for people where they feel like they're not sure what their purpose is. And start creating, and you will find your purpose.
It's really interesting. There's an American entrepreneur. He's one of these kind of new wave of entrepreneurs who's made a lot of money in the tech industry. So it's kind of super high powered, super high pressured jobs. And he says every day he starts with ecstatic dance. So he just cranks up the techno really loud and just turns off the lights and just jumps around his living room. And then any kind of mental blockages he's got at the beginning of the day, they're kind of, by the time he's finished this, they're gone.
Mm.
And it makes me think of the Zen artists in Japan who would draw the enso, the circle, and it would just be a quick circle. And the idea being to free them up and to release any kind of tension so that they could then get on and create their purest art. We have all these things that we're holding on to. And whether we do it through kind of shaking or whether we do it through some sort of, emotional, physical purging, if you like, we need to shake it off so that we can find out who we really are underneath and kind of step forward confidently, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Where do you think a lot of our pain comes from? I mean, we all seem to have this pain. You talked about putting it in a box. Is it past traumas? Is it just the kind of human condition? Is it something that is unavoidable? Where does it all come from, do you think?
I think it is part of the human condition. I think that nobody gets out of this life without suffering, without hurt, without heartbreaks and loss. It's part of being human, and it's what we do with it, and that's where we can transform it, actually. And that's why I always say that pain can be something quite alchemical if we apply enough love to it and attention to it. But I think we all experience these things, and what that can do, depending on your especially early life experiences, as I'm sure you know, are the pivotal ones. But depending on how significant the pain or traumas are, is that it leads to this kind of fracture where the psyche, the self, splits off, and then we have all these kind of aspects of ourselves that we often don't even know are missing. And that is why people feel this sense of emptiness inside. Often they feel this sense of yearning for something, and they look for it in a job or a partner or shoes or drugs, and it's aspects of themselves. And again, that's what we're really supporting people, is kind of to reclaim these parts of yourself. And that's why I'm not interested in work that is about reinforcing this belief that there's something wrong with you, with me, with any of us. There's nothing wrong with us. We've just forgotten that there's parts of us that have been hurt, that we need to kind of come back and welcome home. And then when we do that, which is the grief work, which I also call soul work, that's when it's a return to wholeness. And I got that wrong for so many years, Chris, even in doing this work in my early years when I was working with women in my 20s. And I was always saying to women, yes, these terrible things happen to you, but you push on through, you be a strong warrior. And it was a mistake, because if you're being a strong warrior and that's all you are, one, it's living a lie, because that's not, we're not one-dimensional like that. And two, it means you are rejecting the parts of yourself, and you're abandoning the parts of yourself that felt abandoned and rejected way back when, and you'll never feel whole unless you go back to those parts. That's my belief.
That's really interesting. I mean, I'm a great lover of quotes as well, and it was, I think, Jiddu Krishnamurti who said, "It's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." Mm-hmm. And we're in the COVID times at the moment. We're kind of going from one lockdown to another. And we're constantly being told we need to be resilient and we need to build our resilience. And it's one of the kind of the survival factors, is how resilient we become. But in essence, that's kind of saying you have to accept that things are going to be awful and just get on with it. And is there another way you can flip that on its head and say, actually, no, I don't accept that things are going to be awful. I'm going to find the joy, and I'm going to be sensitive, and I'm going to feel my pain and face up to it, and own it. And I think it was Oprah Winfrey said, your suffering is your story. That's what makes you unique and strong. I mean, do we need to develop these thick skins and this kind of endurance the strength, or can we just flex and be like the grass in the wind, you know?
Yeah, I think some people, their warrior persona has kept them alive, and and it certainly did for me in my childhood. It was a war zone, so not literally, but it felt like a war zone, and you have to feel safe enough to take and let down those defenses, but they come to a point where they no longer serve you, and they kind of keep you in a prison. It's a very safe prison, but also a very lonely one. And I think what resilience really is, as I understand it, is the capacity to sort of recover from life's challenges quite swiftly, and not be completely floored by something like the pandemic, as frightening and kind of devastating as it has been, and it continues to be in our world, but actually to have the skills to be able to to weather the storms of life. And one of the ways that you do that, which is what you said, is through cultivating joy. So I always say that we need to release our emotions, and we need also relief from them. So and relief is not avoidance. So we allow ourselves to feel our feelings and grieve what's happening in the world fully, alongside taking action to cultivate joy. And gratitude is one of the key ingredients, and it gets bandied around, as we know, and gratitude practices, etc. But really, to live gratefully, it's like the greatest gift you could give to yourself, if you do it heartfelt, if it really touches your heart. I could think of 100 things to be grateful for before I've left my bed in the morning. And it's because I really cultivate a life of gratitude, and that feeds joy. And I think, we can, when you get to that place, you really can flex in the wind, because you're just, you're not so fear driven as well. It's like that doesn't consume you. I think fundamentally, Chris, what I've learned in my 53 years is overall, and not all the time, because I'm human and flawed and imperfect, etc. But a lot of the time I trust in life. And that's what all my work has led me to, is I trust life, the process of living. I trust it. And that brings with it quite some ease.
Yeah, there is that. There's a saying, I don't know who said it or where it's come from, but there's a saying, have strength because you've survived 100% of all the things you've been through so far. And I found a great deal of kind of encouragement from that, when things have been difficult, just to know that I'm still here. All these hard things have happened. I've been broke, I've been fed up, I've had miserable times, and I'm still here. I'm still here, and I'm relatively happy. Things are going my way. And it's that kind of sense of faith that we can be terrified, and we're kind of encouraged to be terrified as well. I think our genetics are, keeping us on the lookout for tigers in the jungle, and we're now applying that to the bad conversations from our boss, or the letter from the bank that comes through the post. And there's a constant kind of fear of what might go wrong. And it reminds me a little bit of a quote that is misattributed to Einstein. And he says, one of the most important decisions you can make is whether you think the universe is going to be friendly or hostile. And it's that question is not about the universe, it's about your perspective. Like, are you approaching life like it's friendly, or are you approaching life like it's hostile? And I think so many of us, and me as well, for so many years, went around assuming that life was hostile. And it's switching that kind of mental framework, I guess, and just saying, actually, no, the world can be amazing. And in that realization, everything gets bigger. Your world gets bigger, and the things you are grateful for become much more pronounced and bigger. Was there a particular turning point for you when this realization happened? Did it click suddenly, or was it gradual?
No, I think it's a gradual, I think it's a gradual process. And again, I believe in that there are, like Richard Rohr talks about the necessary suffering and the phases of life, and in his book Falling Upwards, which is one of my favorites, and he says that we come to a place, usually through crises, where you're basically forced, I always call it nose down, into humility street, where you're really forced nose down in the dirt to kind of reevaluate your life. And that, I think, is, and I've had many of those. I was a slow learner. And I think what that does is each time you're learning and growing and cracking, almost deconstructing the egoic structures, and then you eventually, and I think it's part of the lifetime's journey, if you're lucky enough to be around long enough, you get to a place, if you do your inner work, where you kind of recognize that it's all kind of perfect and meant to be. And that doesn't mean, and I don't say that in a kind of trite way where it's like, people aren't in desperate grief and desperate suffering, desperate pain. That I've just reached a stage in my life, and I know that I will experience loss, and I know if I don't go first, and I know that I will experience more. People I love will die, people I love will leave, things will happen, and I'm accepting of that. I wouldn't say I'm happy about it, I wouldn't say I'm okay with it, but I accept it. And as again Eckhart Tolle says, resistance is suffering, and it is. You can resist life all you like, but life will happen anyway. And like you said, it's how you cope with life and how you adapt with life, and I've learned to trust life. And that's been thousands of pounds of therapy and a lot of years. So no, it wasn't an instant thing, although I would say, Chris, that in the last kind of, I'm 53, so I suppose in the last maybe since 45ish, I started to deepen into more of a spiritual dimension to my life and to life itself. So it was almost like I had to deal with my individual wounds, and then I got more interested in the collective ones, and that was a process. And then went beyond that into the kind of bigger meaning of existence. But that was around about 45 when that started to really deepen for me.
It's really interesting. Do you think that we have this notion of the midlife crisis? And I sometimes think about this myself. It's like, is it a crisis, or is it actually a bit of a waking up? Confucius said that man has two lives, and the second one begins when he realizes he only has one. And it's that kind of awakening. You get to a point in your life where you realize you're probably about halfway through now, and actually I better start getting serious about enjoying this whole process, and that's when we start to do the work, maybe, or we start to realize that we haven't got things sussed as perhaps we should have, or we go and buy a motorcycle or something like that,
or both.
Or both, absolutely.
Trying
to recapture our youths, maybe, and have that fulfillment that we should have had when we were younger, perhaps. I don't know. How do we, what's it all about? Where does it come from?
I mean, I think the midlife crisis is, but often that is the point that Richard Rohr was making around, you hit that, and it often is for people in midlife, because in the first phase of life, it is the ego is very strong, and it's necessary. It's necessary so that we build a family and build a career, so we can support our family and make money and have buy or rent a safe base for our family home, etc. So we need to, and we're spending, many people spend a lot of time doing that. And so it's only then when you hit this necessary suffering, and for many people, as I said, that happens many times, that's when you do. It's like I always for myself, I call it like Rip Van Twinkle, because it's like, he was asleep for, I can't remember, depending on what story but it was something like 20 years. And I love the story because he actually went drinking, he was drinking alcohol, and he fell asleep, and then he woke up and everything had changed. And I thought, that's pretty much the modern tale, isn't it? Yeah. And that's what happened. Everyone's just drinking or eating or consuming in some way. And so it needs, we're such creatures of comfort as well, Chris. We need to suffer in order to actually wake the hell up. And that's why I call it Rip Van Twinkle, because it's like that's where I got my twinkles, like, oh gosh, I can actually really see now, and I really see life, and I see how precious it is. And I spent so much of my life in pain and really sort of not appreciating everything that was in front of me. I wasn't able to, because I was too, I always call it my wound lens. My lenses were too clouded with my own pain. But yeah, so I think some people are really wise old souls, and we see people on the bridge, you know, sometimes they're really young but they're really old, and they're ahead of the game. I always say, I mean, imagine figuring all this out at 20, 25, like whoop, whoop. But also I've seen that with young people, and they feel really alienated because all their friends are talking about, you know, getting smashed and you know, fancying someone or whatever, and they're like, I'm interested in the deeper meaning of existence. That going to come at a price as well. So, but yeah, I just have learned to trust life and love life.
It's
And
funny.
that doesn't mean I don't get sad, and it doesn't mean I
No.
don't get angry. It means I feel everything, and the more we feel the so-called darker emotions, the more we feel the joy.
I had a conversation with Jason Garner, who is a big practicer of a kind of Buddhist teachings, if you like, and he was a very successful music industry guy for a while in America, and then he decided to adopt a more peaceful and accepting way of life. And he said that life is always talking to us. You know, it's always constantly talking to us, but it's going to keep talking to us until we start to listen. And he said it will keep getting louder and louder and louder until eventually it slaps you in the face. And, you know, I look at people like Sharon Salzberg and, you know, all the great Buddhist teachers and meditation teachers, Jack Cornfield, Tara Brach. They've all had some kind of trauma that has taken them to rock bottom. You know, they've had abusive parents, or they've had drug addictions, or some kind of crisis that's taken them right down to rock bottom. And then they've kind of, like a kind of caterpillar turning into a butterfly, they've come out transformed and suddenly much more connected to life.
Mm.
I mean, there are people who go through life and they don't have those traumas. Do they still get to experience the joy, or is it something that's reserved just for those who are aware of their suffering?
I mean, I don't know the answer to that, Chris, really. I know that some people seem to have a much easier ride in life than others. But I've worked with so many people from so many different walks of life. And, you know, and I came from quite a financially, you know, deprived background. And so for many years in my early career, I would work with, you know, kind of lords and ladies and all these people with titles. And I had my own, made my own assumptions about that. Like, oh, you know, the whole kind of poor you in your gilded cage kind of thing. These were my honest judgments at that time. And actually, I've seen, you know, I mean, money is meaningless anyway, but in that sense, and I've seen the misery that money has caused people, and the suffering that is caused through the generations of families of trying to hold on to this money so tightly, you know, and also, yeah, and what the darker forces that come through as a result of that. So I know some people have a lighter load to carry in this lifetime than others, but I really question, having worked with so many different people, how is it that they get off more lightly, or is it that they just refuse to acknowledge their own pain and their own suffering? Because that, you know, if I use boarding school as example, I worked with hundreds of people that attended boarding school, and they're, you know, if you've ever seen the making of them, the film about boarding school, it's almost like the brainwashing process. So they say, you know, didn't do me any harm, you know, and it's like, but, you know, I had this the other day with somebody I spoke to, and he said, no, I love boarding school, and, you know, I feel emotionally dead, but I'm all right with that. And it's like, yeah, that sounds like hell to me. You
It's
know,
funny. I saw that someone commented the other day. They said, when you hear someone say, I went through this experience and it didn't do me any harm," and they use that as a reason to make other people go through that experience, it kind of makes you think, well, actually, maybe it did do you some harm. Maybe
yeah,
you are in a bad way, you know.
yeah,
And
yeah.
another thing someone else said, Tim Ferriss it was, he said, you know, we have to deal with our stuff, because the fact is, we are dealing with it one way or another.
Yeah.
We're dealing with it, and we either deal with it in a proactive, positive way, or we deal with it in the worst way possible. And that means letting it get on top of us and, amplify that misery and that pain and that suffering.
Absolutely. And I mean, don't want to get political here, but President Trump is a classic example of a traumatized person that has zero awareness by the sounds of it, and just about how, again, quoting Richard Rohr, when he says, if you do not transform your pain, you will always transmit it. And that is exactly what he's done. He's turned his pain, and if you sit on pain like anger and fear long enough, it can transmute into something really dark, which is rage. Yeah. And then if you get power and money in that pot with rage, better watch out, yes, I just think that Trump is a great, I mean, I'm fascinated by him on, in terms of his psychology, but it is at an extreme level that is, and he's showing us, if you don't do your inner work, and you can look at most of the British politicians and the boarding school bunches, and it's like, heaven help us if that is what we, these are the people that are leading our country. Heaven help us.
But I think these people are an example of a kind of older world. I mean, when I grew up, we didn't really talk about feelings very much, and it wasn't something we talked about in school either. You got on with it, stiff upper lip, all this kind of stuff. And you've had generation after generation told to just knuckle down, no complaining, and get on with it. And inside, they're falling apart, but they're hiding it with abusive relationships, with alcohol, with kind of suppressed emotions and things like that. Whereas today, we're able to have conversations like this. Mental health is never far from the public agenda, whatever our leaders look like. We're having conversations about sexuality, about mental health, about who we really are underneath all of these kind of likes and all of this kind of validation. Do you think we're on a cusp of changing things where people can finally be themselves rather than fall into these old ways of having to behave like they're supposed to behave?
Yeah, I think things are changing. I think and this is where you can see, when people who are considered that funny word famous, when people are well known or whatever, if they use their platforms, as a force for good and for change, even in ways of, posting images of their life which are more in alignment with the truth of all of us, that we all look like crap when we get up in the morning, that we all go to the toilet, that we all have rough days, and we all just are human, and that is beautiful and flawed, and I think when we see people, I always use the example of Fern Cotton, and she's somebody, and she posts pictures of herself having no sleep, looking, like a woman that's had no sleep with a young baby. And I think it seems meaningless, but I think it's actually a very powerful message, because she's got over 3 million people that look at that. And what it's saying to those 3 million people is, it's okay to look like this. It's okay. It doesn't matter. We all struggle. And I think that is a beautiful message and a powerful way to use something as bizarre as celebrity, whatever that means. So yeah, I think it is changing. I think we are. The pandemic is such an opportunity for people to retreat one way or another, to really step back, slow down, and people are. I've heard conversations of people where they're starting to say, I don't want to do that anymore, myself included. I was traveling so much, I'm like, I don't want to do that anymore. So I think it is allowing people to wake up, but there's also so many temptations and so much invested in us staying asleep. So that whole machine is really invested in us not feeling good enough and not waking up. So
absolutely. Well, I mean, that's how the economy works, isn't it? You don't buy stuff if you're happy with what you've got.
No, exactly.
Exactly. You talked about sort of Fern Cotton and other celebrities kind of normalizing being human. So almost, we've mentioned earlier on this return to who we really are. And you've said you kind of got faith in life. How do we kind of learn to say yes to who we really are, and kind of accept that, we might want to look our best every day, but there are some days where actually I'm feeling pretty awful. I haven't got anything clean to wear, and I didn't do the washing. I should have done it. And, how do we learn to be okay with ourselves and to love ourselves, I suppose?
I mean, it's such a good question, Chris, because I think this whole, again, a bit like gratitude, self-love is something that people, some people, you hear that, you think, oh, please, and actually, people have said to me, oh, it's navel gazing, it's narcissism, it's self-obsession, and I don't agree one iota. The self-love that I'm talking about, the self-love that I believe in, is the opposite of navel gazing, because when you truly and deeply love yourself, and acceptance comes the step before that, you start to accept, then like, and then love yourself. That's the process. And that involves doing your inner work, healing your wounds, etc. And when you truly get to that place of loving yourself fully, deeply, the reason it's not self-obsession is because you get out of your own way. It's like you're not driven in life by your wounds. You're not acting out. You're not making really destructive decisions or choices or whatever. And you're not consumed with your own pain. It's like you clear the debris from in front of you, from inside you, from your eyes, and then you can truly see. And it's the opposite of self-absorption, because then you look up from your own pain, you say, oh, there's all these other people that are in pain or need help, or there's all these other ways that I can love and serve in the world. That's why I call it inner activism. It's not in and of itself about individual wounds. It's about a collective healing experience, so that we, one, don't add to the pain body of the world, and two, that we can be in service in the world. So I think self-love is like the most radical act of activism you could ever take, but it takes work. And that's what, again, people are, they're loath to invest in themselves in that way. And that doesn't always have to be financially. It can be even just the time. And again, the machine keeps us so exhausted and busy, we feel like, oh, the last thing you want to do at night is to go into sort of contemplation and reflection. But it's what's necessary. If you don't, I call it being an emotional detective of your own life. If you don't start to truly examine your life and truly understand and then grieve what happened to you, it's very, very hard to come back to that place of, I love myself, I'm fine with who I am, and to really say yes to living an authentic life, to show up. I endeavor to show up every day as I am. That doesn't mean I don't put on my little earrings or whatever, but it means that I show up and I say, yes, I'm here and I'm nervous and I'm still here, and I'm all right. I would like you to like me, as an example. I don't need you to like me because I like me. And that is freedom, Chris. That is hard-won freedom.
That is hard-won freedom. And I think it's something that many of us are kind of battling with from our earliest days in education, then into work. I mean, a lot of my hang-ups come from feeling like a failure. And as a result of that, there's been a lot of kind of self-loathing. And I wrote an article for The Guardian a couple of years ago. And I said that, I've been embracing meditation and some other kind of mindfulness techniques to try and tackle these kind of issues that I've got around self-loathing. And it's an ongoing process. I don't think it's something I'll ever fully, tackle and be done with. But the number of people who reached out to me and said, this totally resonated with me, because I kind of hate myself for not being good enough. And I hate myself for not earning enough or being this person that society demands that I be. And, so much of my self-esteem and my feeling of worth is attached to these other things. Why can't we just be happy with who we are? I mean, it's not too much to ask, I don't think, is it? We should be.
But let's not underestimate the power of conditioning, the power of generational, what I call poisoned arrows, all the arrows that were shot into your father's fathers and your father's father's father, and that goes down through the generations, and you're like, okay, I've got to, achievement means this,
Yeah.
success means that, I cannot fail, whatever that means, and those kind of messages are, they're kind of in our DNA, and especially for men around the achievement, success, making money, protector, provider, da 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 da. Um, and um, and yeah, it is. This is the kind of sad thing, or maybe not, it's not sad, but just the inevitable thing is that you almost have to you almost have to become a so-called failure,
Yeah.
to the point where you have that kind of belief is, it's like, you failed so on such a grand scale in terms of your old thinking around what it meant to be a success, that there's then no other way but to start, it's the rock bottom piece, to start kind of saying, okay, maybe there's a new way that I can build a relationship with success and what it means to be a success and happy, and to succeed and achieve in my life. And I mean, that's what happens, like you said, to most people on some kind of spiritual path. And it certainly happened to me, in a ladies' toilet at work. It's like I couldn't be the warrior anymore. And it wasn't a choice. It wasn't like I said, oh, I've woken up. I was brought literally to my knees in a ladies' toilet, had a panic attack, but it was a heart attack, couldn't work, couldn't function. And there began swimming up.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think, I mean, that is a pinpoint for you, a kind of turning point. I had a similar thing where it was a kind of revelation. I was in the shower and the voices in my head were deafening as usual. And I was so worn down by it. And I just said, I don't want to listen to this anymore. And they stopped just for a minute. They stopped. And I just finally realized that I do actually have a say in what goes on in my head and in my life. But it means not being who I perceive society to want me to be. And that takes courage, I think. Letting go takes courage. Sometimes just being yourself and just saying, forget what everyone else wants, takes a lot of courage.
It really, really does. And I think there's a kind of added sort of dimension to that for men as well, with all the things that we talked about in terms of the kind of how men are socialized around emotional expression and what it means to achieve and succeed and provide, etc. But I think courage is it's a fundamental. Is people think that that living authentically is easy, and people say to me, oh, but you're so authentic. And it's like, because I choose it moment by moment, choice by choice, day by day. I choose to show up as I am. And sometimes I'm better at it than others, but I make a conscious choice every single day to say, I'm not going to pretend, because I lived a lie and it cost me 20 years of my life. And I refuse to live a lie. I just refuse it. I'm not going to do it, because it cost me so much. So I think that it's just fundamental, really, to get to that place one way or another, where you're willing to be courageous in a whole new level, because we're all truth seekers. That's the thing, Chris, is we're all ultimately, what are we seeking? The truth of who we are, the truth of life, the truth of the meaning of it all. And I think if you live a lie, it's that alignment thing. If you're out on the outside does not reflect what's on the inside, that's when we get into trouble. And that's also, like, when you talk about those voices in your head, that belief that we are our mind. It's like, when I realized that they were just voices in my head, it was liberation. And Byron Katie was one of the first great teachers for me of that, when she said, negative thoughts are like bullies, they hunt in packs. And it was like, poof, like, I don't have to think these thoughts. I can actually think something else. And of course, I've been thinking these thoughts on a loop for 20-30 years. It's going to take time, but then I cultivated a new perspective and a new kind of thought process, and that changed my life.
That's quite interesting. I mean, Byron Katie, she also said, and I'm paraphrasing, but she also said that her worst experiences are when she fights with reality. You can't fight with reality, and it goes back to what you were saying about having faith in life. Don't try and fight it. Just accept what's happening now, and just take the action necessary to make things better in the next moment and the next moment.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you find that, is your life better? Is it happier now that you've adopted a more kind of aligned approach with who you are, and a more authentic approach?
Oh my goodness, it is unrecognizable. I'm unrecognizable. That's the other thing when people say people can't change. I'm like, yeah. Don't give me that. I've had like 10 personalities since I was 25. That again is part of the human journey that we go on to be this version of myself and then this version of myself. And this is the 53-year-old version with all the work that I've done on myself. But to say that, to me, I'm not really interested in happy apart from in moments. I have lots of happy moments, and but it's more about a sense of inner peace and faith and contentment. I'm really content, and except when I'm not. But it's my, but it's like that's my underlying foundation for my life, is a sense of kind of inner peace. And like I said, it's been hard earned.
It's like, I think Jack Cornfield says, I'm perfect, but with room for improvement.
I love that. Yeah, it's like someone said to me once, they said, are you this happy all the time? I said, oh, heaven, I hope not, because it would be, you really want to punch me in the face. But also, I am happy most of the time until I'm not. And meaning until I've got a reason to be sad. And when I've got a reason to be sad, then I'm sad. And that's also when you're coming back to what you were saying about, I can't remember who it was, about ecstatic dance. I say to people that I grieve most days. I put on music, and I've learned to use my body as a tool to release. And so as soon as I put on certain music, it activates certain emotion, and then I have a good cry or a good expression of anger, and then it's like, I've allowed those emotions to flow through, and then I come back to that place of balance again. And so I kind of grieve most days, and there's a lot to grieve about in the world, but I don't sit in it. I'm not like wallowing in it like I was in my 20s. I see it as a kind of a movement. Yeah.
I think it's a bit like a pendulum. Sometimes, you have the grief and the suffering over here, and you have the joy and the ecstasis, or whatever you call it, over here. And really, we're somewhere in between. But the more we practice kind of getting our balance right, the more that kind of pendulum shifts in our favor, I think. But it's always swinging. It's always got to swing, because,
And I mean, who would want to be around someone that was chirpy, cheap all day, every day? I wouldn't. I mean, go off. You want someone that's got a richness to them, a depth, and that's what I really endeavor to have in my own life, and that's the people that I'm drawn to, is people that have got real depth and real lightness, and they've got that capacity to be really silly and really foolish and childlike, alongside that real depth of kind of the sort of inner knowing and wisdom that comes from doing the kind of inner work that we've talked about.
We've been chatting for about an hour now, so I won't keep you much longer. But I just want to come back briefly to just the idea of gratitude. And I've been thinking a lot about gratitude lately. And in my kind of lowest point, I started doing my inner work, and I tried practicing this gratitude practice where you get out of bed in the morning, and I was getting up at 3:30 because I was working shifts as a van driver. And with every step you take from your bedroom, you say, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I remember the first day I got down to the kitchen, I've been saying thank you, and I was just thinking, this is awful. I've got nothing to be thankful for. And then I made myself a cup of coffee, and I sort of said, I suppose the first cup of coffee of the day is all right. But that's when it started to kind of run away with itself. And suddenly I was being connected to things that brought me joy, and, things that kind of enabled me to grow. And I kind of see gratitude as a bit of a way of, it's a kind of portal to a bigger world, if you like, because the more you practice it, the more your world expands, and the more you kind of suddenly find you're connected to the beautiful changing seasons, or the laughter of your daughter, or, whatever it is, your grandchildren maybe, whatever it is, your world is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Do you think that is where we find ourselves becoming whole again, is when we're much more connected to the world around us? And to
Yeah,
nature.
but I think there's a necessary, I think it takes inner work to be able to do that. It's like deeply traumatized people as an extreme
Yeah,
find it very hard to be grateful for that first cup of coffee because they're in so much pain. And so you have to turn towards that pain first, you know. And then one of the definitions I love about healing, another definition apart from the return to wholeness, is healing is the application of love to the places that hurt. I love that. And so really to apply love to those places, what that then does is it then frees us up, like I said, to look up, and then you start to go, this cup of coffee.
yeah,
And I always think it's so much, you know, sometimes in gratitude, certainly for myself, is what I'm not exposed to. I think about, like when I do my own practice in the morning, my spiritual practice in the morning, and I think I apart from all the obvious things like the coffee, etc., I think I have awoken in a safe environment, so I am not exposed to violence. I'm in a home where I will not, God willing, be experiencing violence today, you know. And then I look at my grandchildren, and there's a name for this, Chris, I can't remember what it's called. It's almost like a negative something twist on gratitude, where you think about very briefly what possibly could be. You don't dwell there
yeah,
because you don't want to give it too much energy. But I look at one of my grandsons and I think about all those poor children that are sick and dying, and just even for a moment I dip my toe in there and I'm like, oh, how grateful am I,
yeah,
you know. So it's that kind of detail. And it's the same with things like giving thanks for our food or our coffee, to think about with your coffee, how many people have had to do what jobs where in the world so that you could have that in your cup.
yeah.
Blows my mind and my heart wide open. It's like, wow.
There's a guy called AJ Jacobs, and he wrote a book. His life is basically a series of projects. He wrote one book called The Year of Living Biblically, where he did everything according to the instructions of the Bible. And he
Nice.
did another exercise which was all about gratitude. And he decided to personally thank everyone who was involved in making his morning cup of coffee from Starbucks. So he went down to South America and met the coffee farmers, and then the people who grind the beans and process the beans, and then the people who make the paper cup and the ink and all of this kind of stuff. And it took him about a year to thank everybody that was involved in his morning cup of coffee. But I think he's probably a
Love
pretty happy guy. You know,
it.
there's a lot of gratitude in his life that I think.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it's an
I
amazing.
absolutely love that. And it is, that's the thing, is that that if you really, once you've kind of begun the healing process with your own wounds and you're in less pain, emotional pain, then you can start to say, okay, you know, let me really notice. And it is about notice. It's about mindfulness, isn't it? It's about paying attention. But when we're really in what I call the small story of me, when we're really in our pain, it's hard to see the bigger story of we.
Yeah,
And it takes that. That's why, you know, ignoring your past, good luck with that. You know, we have to turn towards the past. We don't need to live there, but we turn to it, we tend to our wounds, so that we can then truly live more in the present and create a future of our own choosing, not something that's defined by our past. And gratitude, just it's the gift that keeps on giving. It's like the magic porridge pot. It just keeps giving and giving, and it just cultivates so much joy.
it is amazing, isn't it? And you're talking about connection as well. I mean, when you are grateful for your coffee and you recognize that you're connected to everyone who put something into it, or you're reading a book and you've got that kind of mental connection with Shakespeare or whoever it was, you know, you're connected to, we're connected right now, but we're also connected to the people who made the laptops that we're using, and all the equipment, and laid the wires in the ground, and we're all connected one way or another. And when we can mindfully embrace that, our worlds become, you know, countless times bigger and more open, and possibilities become infinite almost, you know.
Absolutely. And I think that's where the connection piece that gratitude also gives you, as you rightly say, is because connection is pivotal. And that's why people feel, again, so hopeless, is they've started to disconnect, especially through the pandemic and through so much time on gadgets. And I did a session yesterday about connection for people, and really the different layers there are to connection, and how important it is to have all of those different layers, and especially in these times of lockdown, things like seeing somebody's face, like you and I looking at each other. Yes, it would be better in person, but we're not able to do that. But to see a face, we are relational, we're tribal, we belong together, and so it is very powerful. It's much better than picking up a phone, is to actually see a face. And that keeps us connected, because we need to be connected more than ever.
In my day job, I work as part of an agency, and we're a big international agency. And I'm working from home, obviously, as many of us are at the moment. And those days when I actually get a face-to-face, or even just a voice conversation with some of my colleagues, are the day where I feel so much better about my work and the things I'm doing. But when I'm on my own, my world kind of shrinks, and it becomes more negative, and it becomes more futile. But when you have that connection to something bigger than yourself, even if it's just a conversation with your best friend down the road, or whatever it is, you know that life is about more than just what is hurting in here.
Absolutely. And that's also where the piece about service comes in, Chris, about being in service. Is, again, once you've tended to your wounds, you can then have enough space to not be, not being in service from a place of deficit in yourself, trying to fill your own holes inside you, but from a place of abundance and that remembering wholeness, to really be in service. It is, again, it's just, that's connection, that's gratitude, that's joyful, that's all the things that are so meaningful. It is to love and to serve. It's everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know a lot of people go cringe at that, but it's true. That's what
Luckily, I don't care.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know it's your podcast and you probably do, but I really, one of the great things about this is that I don't care about whether people have an eye roll about that, because it's a hard-won wisdom inside me that's essentially what it's about in life, to love and to serve, and whether you roll your eyes at that or not, that is everything to me.
There's the Susan Jeffers book, isn't there? Feel the fear and do it anyway. And I mean, half the stuff I put on social media, I kind of do it because I know people are going to roll their eyes, and I'm a little bit embarrassed about that, but I think that's even more of a reason to just do it anyway. Just really push those boundaries, and just see how much embarrassment I'm prepared. I knew a chap grew a terrible, awful Ming the Merciless beard just because he knew it looked terrible, and he wanted to kind of toughen himself up to that pain.
I like playing around with, because I pray, although I don't believe in God, but I believe in a different form of prayer than maybe some people traditionally believe. And I always laugh with my sister because, in terms of my followers on social media, and I say, and she's like, oh, you're nearly up to X number. She's very interested in my following numbers. And I'll say, I'm just going to post a God. And she's like, no. And I can't help myself if I post anything to do with prayer, even though if they actually read it, they'd see that I'm not saying anything to do with, a traditional, it's nothing to do with religion. I'm not religious in the slightest, but I have faith. But if I post any of those things, Chris, it just makes me laugh, because you see immediately, people start to follow, oh no. And I can't help myself. It gives me a little giggle.
I think I see all of that as a kind of purification of your audience anyway. All the people who are kind of like, this is too much for me. You're like, well, okay, that's fine for me. Thank you.
Yeah, it's exactly. And it is that thing which comes back to the worthiness piece, is that I don't need, I know my book agent would will kill me when I said that I was, after watching Social Dilemma, I was going to close my account, and she immediately contacted me like, no, you're not. but that, I will continue to, as I said in my account, that I offer quotes to comfort, challenge and inspire, and if people aren't willing to be challenged, then it's only best for them that they unfollow me.
Well, I think that's where growth happens, isn't it? It's in the challenges, it's in the facing up to those things that make us feel a bit uncomfortable. That's where we become more complete and stronger and better, and
Absolutely. And it's just liberating, isn't it, to not need that level of approval anymore. So many years, Chris, I was so frightened of people, it's that tribal thing of needing to belong, and I was so frightened that somebody wouldn't like what I wore or what I said or what I did or whatever. And now I'm just at that ripe old age where I couldn't give two hoots. And it's a real freedom. It's bliss.
But it's funny as well. I think you become a magnet to people who are much more aligned with who you are, because you're resonating with them, rather than these kind of superficial things that we all do for acknowledgement and validation. When you're really kind of being authentic and you're not caring who rolls their eyes at you, that's when people kind of, they find you out,
Yeah, I think also people, like I attract quite a lot of younger women in terms of my work, and I think it's like a positive projection, because they see in me what they have in themselves but split off. Yeah. And so they see that authenticity, they see that wholehearted living, and they think, I want some of that, and they just don't realize. And that's partly my job, is to support them to kind of go, you've got it, that's why you're seeing it in me. It's just helping you remember where you left it.
And I think that's what we're all about, really, isn't it? Everything we're seeking, we have it already, and it's just stripping away all the things that are obscuring it from us, all those bad memories, those bad habits, the kind of trauma and the suffering, to reveal who we really are underneath it all.
Absolutely. But the body, I tell you, as we come towards the end, I really hope people can hear that the body is where you will find your answers, and everything you seek is in your body's wisdom. It really is. So just you can't fix it here.
Become aware of how you're feeling in different circumstances,
and then feel it fully. And really, we're not sedentary. We're not made to be sitting in these chairs. We're not made to be sitting in front of screens. It's that the evolutionary mismatch that you spoke of earlier. And we definitely, if we want to face our past, we have to do that beyond the mind. We have to do that with our body. And it's like an emotional detox. That's what we do on the bridge. We cleanse the people, not of everything, because some people have got a lifetime of hurt, but in 6 days we really tackle the core wounds of people, so that they can, and then people say, I feel lighter. They do feel lighter, because it's a heavy burden to carry, the past.
I think maybe that we need to explore that further, maybe another conversation another time or something, because I'm really interested in finding out more about that, kind of being able to read our bodies in a way and how we're feeling and that kind of thing. But in the meantime, I will kind of wrap it up a little bit. If people want to know more about the bridge and the work you do, where's the best place for them to look?
The website is bridgeretreat.com, and they can, if people are on social media, it's at the Bridge Retreat, or at Donna Lancs, DONNALANCS.
If anyone is listening and wants to find out more about that, I'll put it all in the show notes, and they can read about it later. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation and got a lot from it. I think it's really interesting to know that everything we have, everything we need, is already with us. We've carried it with us our whole lives. Yet, because of the pull of what's expected of us, this desire for validation and affirmation and approval and even permission, we kind of bury down the actual thing that we're looking for, this shining light that is us, deep inside of us, and that is connected to everything. And the more we explore that connection through gratitude, through joy, through our place in the world, the more we can become whole and find out who we really are. So if you want to find out more about Donna and her work, you can go to their website. It's thebridgeretreat.com, or you can find them on Instagram at thebridgeretreat. And similarly, Donna is also on Instagram at Donna Lancs. And if you want to find out more about my podcasts, you can find it on www.chrisbrock.uk. And also, don't forget to subscribe, to like, to do all those things that you're supposed to do as good podcast listeners. I put a lot of love into this, and I really enjoy it. And if you like it too, it'd be great if you could just give us a rating or a review. All right, thanks a lot. Hope you enjoyed this, and I will be back next time with another interesting